Welcome to the For the Love of the Game podcast with your hosts, Jefferson Belfort and Brian Hernandez. This is episode 48. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. We're recording this on a Saturday morning. A little bit. I'm actually happy that usually we record on a Thursday night and everything. And fortunate for us that we pushed to Saturday morning because yesterday got some big news. We're gonna be talking about it today. But before we go into all of that, Jeff, how are you doing today?
Doing all right. Can't really complain. Life's good. Life as a Nets fan isn't great, but
Yeah.
there's always something new, right? But definitely excited to talk about it. Um, say how I'm feeling, talk about a little bit about the situation, and then get into some other topics.
Yes, and we're going to be talking about, of course, we just this week, it's kind of a crazy week for basketball. We had the All-Star, the entire team, the All-Star reserves were announced this week, Kyrie Irving stuff, and, I'm very excited. So let's get into it.
Perfect. So our topics today, obviously, is stop me if you heard this before, the Kyrie Irving drama and the All-Star selections and some of the snubs we'll be going over. And that'll be most of our episode today. Brian, are you ready?
Yeah, man, let's get into it.
All right, perfect. So to start off, obviously, this is on top of mind for everyone. We're we are down to 5 days until the trade deadline. Usually, this is a time to be excited about the opportunities of your team adding pieces to potentially become a contender, or reconfirm or strengthen your stance as a contender. And some teams are usually looking to be sellers in the situation, ensuring a better future. But we are in a very, very unique situation where in the 2022 and 2023 season, there's a lot of parity in this league. There's a lot of teams that think they have a chance. So there's not a lot of sellers in the market right now. And due to that, I think we're going to see some high bargains played out today. During the rest of this week. But someone that decided to shake up the whole landscape of that situation, one being Kyrie, Kyrie Andrew Irving decided wanted to place his trade request yesterday on Friday, February 3rd, saying that he would like to be traded before the February 9th trade deadline, or he will walk in July. Ryan, what is your first takes on this?
It's kind of crazy. I think that was probably the most shocking thing. I don't think I would ever expected that to happen. Like, you could have told me any trade would happen in the league, and I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. But the fact that Kyrie Irving once again made a trade request from the Brooklyn Nets, it's pretty mind blowing, especially just from like how just we were on this podcast talking about all the good vibes in Brooklyn right now. Kevin Durant goes down. All right, let's see how they hold up. Kyrie Irving talking about how he wants to stay in Brooklyn and all this. And then we get into some news about the Nets being not trying to rush into any contract extension talks. And apparently, I guess that rubs Kyrie the wrong way. And now we have this this kind of Mexican standoff right now, where essentially he did request a trade. Do the Brooklyn Nets actually have to trade him? Not necessarily. Um, it's crazy. It is pretty wild. As Jeff, our our group chat is just you're flying in there with mock trades left and right, and what we can do if I'm the Brooklyn Nets right now. This is my thought process is just strictly you're not going to get the value for Kyrie Irving that you want necessarily, just because he's a very polarizing player. Kyrie Irving, the talent, as we always talk about, he's kind of shown this year. Is he a top 5 talent? He's definitely top 10 in the NBA. Maybe top 5. Maybe he's that number 5. I would actually have to do the entire rankings, but he's been so good. But the trades that you're hearing that potentially is going to come back, oh, if Miami's interested, you're going to get Kyle Lowry. Like that's what they want to give up. The guy that scored 3 points the other night, and how many scoreless halves does Kyle Lowry have? And he's on a really bad contract, and that's where it's like, oh, we're gonna give up Kyle Lowry. Might as well give up your 15th man on the bench. Like, or it's a Russell Westbrook who they've been trying to get rid of for all this time. And I think recently we just saw, like, if the Nets even got Russell Westbrook, they're how much, I think they're paying over $20 million in more luxury tax or whatever it was. You probably know better. Like, this is kind of like the offers that we're talking about, and it just doesn't make sense. Run it back, or not run it back, just play it throughout the season. Kevin Durant's coming back soon. There's already reports talking about Kyrie's going to play throughout his contract, and he's not going to sit out of games. He's going to fulfill that contract. What are you doing? You got to keep him. What do you think?
So I'll go on a brief like timeline of this, right? So like late January, we started hearing word about contract extension talks, and it was reported, I believe, from the New York Post that Kyrie Irving's stepmom said that the ball is in the Nets' court,
Mhm.
essentially putting a plea out there that the Nets have to figure this out and do right by Kyrie, right? Granted, Kyrie is, like you said, arguably in the top 10 to 15 players in the league this year. I don't even think that's an argument if you want to even say a little bit higher um uh into being, I wouldn't say top 5, but he's close.
Well, I
But
mean, you can
he's
see that the league actually agrees, because he's out of the 10 players that are all-star starters, he's in there. And I don't think anyone can actually disagree with that. I understand there's,
exactly.
east to west and everything, but definitely I would say top 10. But please go on.
So it's that's the one part that makes it interesting. So like I said, they put the ball in the Nets court. Then a few days later, Mark Stein reports that the Nets decide, you know what, we're gonna play it cool. We don't need to sign him now. What's the point of signing him now? Like that they essentially once again try to bluff one of their players calls and say, you know what, you think that there's something out there for you that's not there, and we're just gonna play it cool till we get closer to the end of the season. You fulfill what you had to do, and then we can talk about a contract after that. And when I saw that report, a little part of me knew something was like, should think about this, or maybe I'm going to be thinking about this in a couple weeks. So that was interesting when I saw that report come out. Then you have Kyrie, who is in these contract communications. Obviously, we got to understand Kyrie is has seemed to become a very mercurial person where he can change his mind on a drop of a dime. Um, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with that because he's a human. Humans do that, right? But it just shows what commitment can you give to someone that is ready to drop everything at a drop of a dime, right? So that scares me about the situation too. And then lastly, I think before I even go into, because I want to go into perspectives before we go into like some real thoughts about this trade, um, is I think that this was Kyrie's last card he could play. And he realized this is the last card I could play. If I put the pressure on them, I let them see what the media like backlash is going to be from this and see what people will think. and just put out flyers to teams that I'm open for market, see what he would get back or what the Nets would get back in this scenario, right? He wanted that to be out there so that the Nets could realize, oh, it's not the same conversation we had in June where there wasn't as much suitors. Now people are thinking about adding me to their team. What you gonna do now, Nets? Like that's what it feels like from the core of this. But granted, Kyrie is a very, very, very proud person in the sense like if he feels that he's being taken for granted or he's taking advantage of, you need an outside perspective to help the situation. In some cases, um, we've seen when this has been an issue since he's been a part of the team. We've seen number of people advocate for him. You see Kevin Durant constantly does. At times, in the negotiation side of it, as cooler heads prevail, usually how those cooler heads prevail is that Joe Tsai and his wife owns the business, right? It's not a lot of times we talk about Josiah and forget that Clara is actually a decision maker as well in this. And at times, Clara has been able to move the two parties together closer when there's issues. And I don't know if that's going to be your perspective here, but I think that that's one of the best situations that could come from here is that Clara adds her piece into this and tries to work it out on that perspective. But it just feels like a standoff, like you mentioned. And because of that, I don't really feel like this is a real trade request, just as much as it didn't feel like
Yep.
a real trade request in the offseason. And it just feels like we're loading up the Lakers fans just to be disappointed again. And because this guy, you just cannot trust what he says at the moment. He wants that money. That is his prevailing situation here. Is he's trying to get that money. He's gonna go somewhere where that gives him that opportunity of getting that money. I know there's talk about him taking the flyer to be be a rental or the rest of the year on some other team. But I'm telling you, no one's going to, even as much as LeBron could yell at Rob Pelinka. I don't think Rob Pelinka is that dumb to just go and get a rental for Kyrie, like use up, exhaust some of their capital because I'm not giving like a lot of people are trying to say the Nets are the desperate one in this situation, but granted, the Nets really do not have to be desperate in this situation. It's all about perception. And in this situation, if you're losing a star, granted, you're losing a top 10 talent if you lose Kyrie, but you're not going to just give him for nickels on the dollar. Like that's just not how any organization should go about this. So is there anything you want to add before I start talking about like the perspectives of like how I feel about things?
No, I mean, I think really good summarization of just like what the situation just actually is. Um, I think both parties are kind of like exactly like you're saying of I think this is more of a just like a tactic. And I think at the end of the day, if Kyrie is like, all right, I do get traded, then cool. But if he ends up staying or he ends up getting a contract extension or whatever, as of now, I think I saw was that correct? Or there was a report saying that even if the Nets extend them the full max contract right now, he won't take it. Is that? I feel
That I will say this
yeah
right now. That is a lie.
yeah
That is a bold-faced lie
yeah.
because I know when they go into trade talks, the first thing any team is going to ask is he expecting us to extend him? And when he hears that if he hears from any of the teams that the Nets are actually genuinely interested in trading him to, say that they won't extend him, just like in the Jay Crowder situation where they allow the player and their agents to start talking to the team before they make the trade. I think that's going to be a similar situation if Kyrie gets dealt. His first thing he's gonna ask is, "Are you guys gonna extend me?" First, he's losing money if he gets extended elsewhere, right?
Mhm.
Yes, the team will have his bird rights so they could go over the cap with whatever he has. But you look at it, there's 5 teams in the league. I don't remember every one of their names. I know Pistons, I know it's all bottom dwellers that actually have cap space to outright sign Kyrie Irving. Every other team that we're considering as a contender do not have a max spot to give to Kyrie Irving. So in any situation, there's no reason to be hasty about it because it's the same situation I felt, which I think they handled it wrong, did last year with James Harden, is you sit and wait out that player because they're going to realize there's not as much options. And it's not because of your talent, it's just like the way how the league works and the level of contracts that players have nowadays is not going to allow for you to go to where you want as easily as you would want it to be. We saw it happen even with the Nets moving on to having Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, is that Kevin Durant was a sign and trade, right? Um, Warriors recuperated some assets from the Nets. And fortunately enough for them, they flipped that asset to wind up being one of the key reasons why they won a championship. Why, as the Nets, would you not think of it in that perspective that if I'm losing a guy of this talent, I can't recuperate something. And the only way you're going to do that, the best way you're going to do that, is I think play out the season, Kyrie do what he wants to do in this season. If he shows that he deserves that contract, you have up to June 30th to offer him that contract. Timing is where I get upset about Kyrie about this because the timing of this is ridiculous. Where you have a team that is considered a contender in this league. If there was ever a year where it felt wide open for you to have a chance at making it to a championship, it would be this year. And you're gonna stake it off of you not getting your money the time you want it is kind of asinine to me. And I just think that cooler heads prevail when they realize like we're not gonna get what we think we should get back, and you're not gonna go, we're not just gonna give you to where you want to go for nothing. It just makes
Yeah.
no sense for us.
Makes no sense no matter what. Like, so you're trying to win a championship this year. Try to win a championship with, the next couple years that you have Kevin Durant. Any trade you make does not get you any closer to really that goal. And the only scenario in my mind that gets you closer to that goal is just keeping Kyrie. If you keep Kyrie this year, one, we already saw how good the team looks just with Kyrie and Kevin Durant. So you have that. Even if Kyrie goes, and like you're saying, most likely is going to be a sign and trade, even if it wasn't a sign and trade, you gave it one of your best shots and probably the best shot that you really would have ever had to win a championship. And to me, that doesn't really make sense to, like you're saying, give them up for scraps and and role players and guys that can't even get off the bench and stuff like that and don't play in fourth quarter situations. Why would you do that? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Exactly. That's where I'm saying like that's another part of this whole trade request is I I said this earlier in like a group chat that we're in is that value is perception, right?
Yep.
It's completely perceived by however someone's opinion is swayed, right? So in this case, look, if you take the outside context out of it, you're giving someone that can help you win a championship. There's no way where you're giving them a chance at a championship and you get nothing of value back. Like
Yep.
if you look at all of the trades, they don't speak to what a superstar trade would typically look like, right? If you don't have the assets and players to give to someone, you typically go for draft capital. And when you make that stance as a team that you're going to go for draft capital, that means you've kind of gave up the idea of winning that year, right?
Yep.
If that's the calculus, if that's the thought process, by all means, find the best place to get him to get recuperate as much draft capital. And who knows, you still have Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant has to be advocated in these decision makings, right? If you're going to do that, you have to then think, what can I do with this draft capital to then turn into valuable pieces that can play alongside the superstar, right? That's the only mindset that should be of this if you're thinking about moving Kyrie. If it's not in line with that, I don't think there's a trade that will make this make sense in any way. You gave up like and it's so easy to go on Twitter listening to what hastily thought Twitter users are thinking about moving a player. If we look back at like with James Harden's situation, which moved very quiet, really fast in about 2 weeks,
Mhm.
right? Um, that he was able to put to move on from where he was to going to the Sixers. The Nets moved so fast through that decision making process that in a situation where, like, now I sit back and I think about it, Ben Simmons had back surgery this summer. How does this not come up in a physical? How does this not even like, there's no, that trade does not reflect what you got back in that situation because you gave up arguably top 20, top 15, top 10, whatever. You didn't make the All-Star, which is kind of crazy.
Mhm.
We'll talk about that later, but um uh top 20 player in this league, and you got him for a guy that doesn't play or that seamlessly cannot play because of issues that are going on with him. And granted, no one could have foresee it got to this point of like not being able to do what EU was able to do in the past. But um it was just they moved too fast through that situation. I think there was other situations or suitors. You're in a place, you have the talent. You're in the place of leverage. Don't ever let anyone tell you, like you having the value, having the valuable piece, you're the one in a disadvantage just because they want to leave. You're making the trade. These guys don't have there's like a number of players in this league that have a no trade clause. And a number of those players do not do not have the guys that do have it are not impactful players that are going to be the reason why you win a championship. So I just don't understand the calculus behind moving so fast through it, trying to find a suitor in 7 days, and then moving forward and saying we could still contend.
Yeah, it like we said, like you mentioned before, it doesn't feel like a real trade request. It's a trade request probably from anger and, like you're saying, feeling disrespected, and that's about it. But like, all right, Kevin Durant, if you don't trade him, like, tell me that in this does this world sound unrealistic? You don't trade Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant comes back, you guys go on a 8 game winning streak. Everyone's all happy. Things are all well. And you think Kyrie Irving doesn't think like, oh, maybe I want to resign here. Maybe I actually want to stay. Maybe this actually isn't too bad if he gets his money. Or you guys even win a championship. You think Kyrie still is like, nah, I don't like the Nets. Get me out of here. Even though last week he was just talking about how much he loves it and there, and he's close to he's close to home and everything in Jersey. Like, you think he's just gonna leave like that? I don't. I just don't see it.
It just feels like such a crazy jump to go from there in about a month span of time, you
Yep.
know? Um, I did say I was gonna give perspectives that I feel. So my first perspective as a fan, it's what the hell? Like, come on. Like, what the hell? Like, we haven't had some drama in a little bit. Guys are playing decent without Kevin Durant. It's expected you're gonna have a drop off. Kevin Durant isn't there. But
Yep.
the biggest difference between what we're seeing this year and what we saw last year is there's a level of effort that's being played out there. Granted, it's hard to say that when you lose by 40 to the Celtics just a couple days ago, but there's a level of effort that wasn't there. You have a budding star, Nick Claxton. Ben Simmons, let him figure it out. I don't know what to say about that guy anymore. Just let him figure it out. If he becomes a better player come next year and more confident and more skilled and regains some of that strength and athletic ability, like Kevin Porter was saying was an issue for him when he had back injury, is that they typically say in that second year is where you really see that person come back. So if that's the what happens in that case, just let him play it out, like figure himself out and see what happens, right? And then if anything, if you guys stock up high enough, God, try to see if there's a chance to move him. um, but it's just like, yeah, it's like, can we go through some time where we don't have to be the only dysfunctional NBA team out there, because there's dysfunction in the league, but like not to this level because it never is about basketball. It's
Yep.
never about basketball being the calculus of things when the Nets have dysfunction, right? So that was my fan perspective. The team perspective, and I put up some numbers. Like, granted, I think they're dumb by not offering him full max. I think you just kill the situation. He's still an asset that can be moved if you get him on a full contract. Because I'm telling you this right now. If Kyrie was signed to a 4-year deal and you tried to move him and he says this, it's a lot easier to move him. Because now you know you're expending that money, right? You could get pieces back. That team that's getting him back, even if they get him back and they know they have to pay him, they know he can't walk. They know he can't walk. And if he wants to walk, oh, well, he really doesn't have as much options in that point, like, because there's no once you're signed to a contract, you walk. He could retire, he could try to retire, but I bet you the Lakers would be more willing to know if Kyrie had 2 years on his contract than he had half of a season on his contract, because it would be a lot easier to say, "Hey, we could have 2 runs at this championship rather than just less than like, think about how unrealistic this is that we think that he's going to come in there in the last 30 games and cause the Lakers to win a championship while they're sitting at the 12th spot in the in the West right now in the play-ins, right? Granted, the difference between the 4th to the 12th seed is not that big, but still, like, we do this a lot with the Lakers is we always minimize that there's talent above the Lakers. Like, these people didn't get to the point that they're at because they're not talented. Like, the Lakers are a team that easily can be beaten in my mind. You know,
Yep.
even with Kyrie, because I think that's a flawed roster, right? So there's that perspective that I think is weighing heavy. But back into the numbers, as I was saying, as why I see like there is as much as I think it's dumb not to offer them this, why I think it is a part of their calculus right now is the Nets see it as this. They signed Kyrie in 2019, right? That is a grand total of 297 games that have passed since they've signed him. Kyrie has played in 133 of those games. That is 44% of the contract was spent actually on the court. Granted, injuries come up, life things come up. You understand that. There's a perspective of that comes up. But as a team, I also see that if you can't have a player for more than 60% of 60% is just being nice because of what the league is at this point, right? If you can't even have a player for 60% of your games, like, what is that? Like, that's not a fair bargain to give to a team when you commit to them, you sign a 4-year contract, and you're gone that much. Only in this time seen 2 All-Star appearances from him, and that's a starter now. You've only seen him in one playoffs appearance, which was cut short by an injury. Like there's just not enough to go off to give him everything that he wants. But at the same time, it's 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 still it still makes sense why he feels how he feels, right? But I honestly understand why the team feels how they feel. But I will say this as well is that Nets might have the Nets have been shooting themselves in the foot the last couple of years about how they negotiate anything. They've done crazy ask of players that no other team does. It feels like this turn really came since Joe Tsai has become the owner. Is that Joe Tsai tries to prove that he's a tough guy or something, and he wants you to prove something to him before he provides you a contract. And honestly, I understand that side of it from his perspective, but I also think he needs to understand which league that he walk into. You didn't walk into you didn't walk into the NFL, man. You didn't walk into the MLB. Like these are leagues where they have a lot of stipulations in their contracts. Granted, we always see in MLB guys have crazy deals, but there's loads of stipulations that fall in there that if you drop off, you're not going to get the money that you want, right? Or you deserve, or you feel that you deserve, right? NFL, same way. The NBA is not the only league. League that allows for fully guaranteed contracts. You can't think that you are now the trendsetter of giving partially guaranteed contracts. It's just not going to play well. And players have spoken about this. It was Jalen Brown that spoke about it earlier in the year, where he believed that it's crazy what they're trying to do within the situation first, of like the suspension. He's spoken about like contracts, about like where I think he's been very vocal about how he feels about Joe Tsai, is what I'm trying to say. Is that he doesn't understand where in this type of league, in this contract, in this type of league where you guarantee contracts and you're trying to do things that are abnormal to how contracts are negotiated upon in this league. So he's obviously in a unique situation. Granted, he put himself in that situation, but it's definitely, if no one else that has caused issues in the league has ever seen an abnormal contract like this, I don't know why Kyrie has to be the banner man for starting it.
Yeah. It's so a couple things there. It's kind of funny. So you're you're talking about how having Kyrie on a 4-year contract, it's actually good for his value. It helps the team have like that stability of, oh, he's not going to leave somewhere else. I wanted to push back on that, and I kind of feel like you made that point as to why you don't give him that 4-year contract and why teams don't want to do anything like that. We hear all the time of teams are wary of giving him that 4-year max, and I'm interested to see what's going to happen if when he goes on the free market, if he doesn't extend or anything like that this offseason, of if teams are even going to give him that 4-year max, because exactly what you mentioned, he has all those. He's played 44% of his contract so far. He's every year there's a new story, and like you talk about, it's not basketball court. Yeah, he gets injured, but like most stars get injured, most players get injured. So I'm not too crazy about something like that. But how many times have we seen Kyrie Irving just causing drama for teams? We've I feel like every year there's something new, and especially like his last year in Cleveland. With the stuff in Boston, we had a ton about how many times. Like I feel like you can't take Kyrie at his word of anything he says, because remember at the start of the year with Kyrie of in Boston, hey, I want to stay, I'm gonna resign this and that, and then by the by halfway through the season, hey, get me out of here, I want to leave, and he goes to the Nets and everything. Um, teams find that very scary to guarantee that kind of money for a guy that you never know what's going to happen. And I don't think it's unrealistic to see the scenario where you give Kyrie that contract and one day he just goes, I don't want to play anymore. Like I don't think that's necessarily unrealistic. Is it likely to happen? No, but I can see like a 10-20% chance outcome that happens. Kyrie wants to do something else other than basketball. Any other player in the league, I don't think you can really say that for. And that's what just he's such a anything can happen kind of player. Even not on basketball, but just as a person, you can see him doing anything. It makes it hard. I don't know if teams would even value having Kyrie for that type of money. Like everyone, I think everyone agrees that he's a max type of player, but to give him that 4-year contract is tough. I think the only team that should actually do that is the Brooklyn Nets, just because of where you guys are and how he's been with the team. Like you're talking about, it's not actually anything with basketball. You know, he plays well with Kevin Durant. The team looked amazing this year. He's young. He's There's nothing like that. It's just the fact of I don't know. He's the biggest wild card you can see.
Yeah, that what you just said makes me just like so wearisome about like I feel like all of the talk is absent logic too though.
Yep.
Like well, I mentioned it earlier too. It's like if you know that he only plays 44% of the games, right? As a team that you're expecting him to come onto your team, right? Why do you think that he greatly changes what you're doing? Like anywhere has to have that apprehension. But that's what I'm saying. This is the part that's being missed is that as soon as he is like, let's say the Nets try to play ball again, because this is the same exact situation I played off in June, right? Is like Nets called his bluff and said, all right, go find yourself a trade.
Yep.
Go find someone that will pay you the money that you're getting paid, right? And will sign you. Like there was no market for that. And
Exactly.
he's gonna realize that again if he does it again. If he goes out there. The issues, the drama that is attached to him is stopping him from getting what he's owed. And Stephen A. Smith talked about it a lot during that time, right? Is that he's a guy that deserves Dame Lillard type money, 50, 60 mil a year, right? When it comes to the back end of his contract. But guy is just someone you can't trust. It's so sad to say because like I do love the player. I do love there's aspects of him that I love about him, and he makes it so hard on anyone. Like I don't think in any situation, and the one that's being said as the centerpiece of it, um, the Westbrook and the
Yeah.
two Lakers picks. Why do you continue to give up your future? The Lakers are not playing for their future in any means. And I think we've had a discussion about this before where you say that you believe that the Lakers could come back from this, but I don't believe under this type of regime who they have on the top of the helm, they will be a successful team anytime soon. If they get a one-off championship, okay. They win a championship this year, okay. But is that the standard of like what everyone knew the Lakers to be? No, this is not the standard of what you knew the Lakers to be. You knew them to be a stable, winning franchise, right? They had some lulls, but like there was never a point where like it looked this bad. Like it looks so bad. This everything about this screams desperation for them. For us, yes, it puts us in a bad situation. But granted, I don't think that the Nets, even with the Houston Rockets having the picks that the Nets have, unless if Kevin Durant is gone completely 100%, there's no way in my mind that they see the type of return that the Celtics saw when they got the Nets pick because it was
Yep.
completely bleak. Like what the Nets put together in waiting for those guys and giving up those picks for that opportunity for a 1 year rental is the same situation that the Lakers are trying to put themselves in. A lot of people forget Paul Pierce walked right after that trade. He walked, so you didn't recuperate that back. Kevin Garnett was a shell of himself. You know, if trade is like a lot of talks is saying that Joe Harris would be moved to the Lakers too. Okay, great. Joe Harris hasn't even been playing like Joe
Yeah.
Harris that we know of, right? Granted, still could be a shooter. That's helpful. But what is the calculus after next year? Are you going to give him that 4 year contract that he's looking for, that he's desperately looking for? Likely you're going to say no because it's not going to help your team win a championship for the long term, right? Have a guy you can't rely on in AD who's always injured. You have a guy in LeBron that is reaching closer and closer. He's closer to the end than he is to the beginning, is what to say.
Yeah.
Obviously, still playing at an extreme level, but you just can't or continue to mortgage your future just for one-off championships. Like, I just don't see how that makes sense and how this is going to be sustainable for them if they make this trade. Granted, I think there's a world of me where, and as we move down into a little bit of talking about some of the mock trades we've seen, I think that there's a world for me that where I go back to you negotiate you negotiate with Kevin Durant through all of this. Granted, I think by year's end, Sean Marks, he got to be gone. He has to be gone. He can't be the one making those decisions. But you recuperate those two picks from the Lakers, had two picks from the Sixers. They're far further down the line. There is this year's pick too from the Sixers. They have the 27 from the Sixers. They have the 27 from the Lakers. They have the 29 from the Lakers. That right there with Kevin Durant, still knowing players still know who Kevin Durant is. Players still are going to want to play with Kevin Durant. You find pieces that fit around Kevin Durant, or even if it means to use some of that pick or draft capital to find a way to get off of Ben Simmons' contract is where you have to start having the calculus if you decide to go down this road. I don't think it makes sense, but if it does happen, I think you take those picks, you try to make it a three-way trade. You do not by any chance take on Westbrook's contract. You are adding 50 if money is a problem for you,
Yeah.
if you're Joe Tsai, you're adding $56 million to your luxury tax bill
That's
by the
56.
end of the year by adding Russell Westbrook to your team. You do not do that. You do not, in any chance, take that on. Find a team that's willing to, if you have to split the picks that the Lakers have, get one of the picks and then the other team gets the other pick just to pick up Westbrook, you recuperate some other type of talent. Westbrook is just not the guy that the Nets need at this moment in their calculus.
Yeah, I don't exactly what you're saying. I don't see the I don't see Kyrie Irving going to LA if it's not a three-team trade. Because exactly what you're saying, it makes zero sense for Westbrook to go to Brooklyn. Now you're paying all this money in luxury tax. Does not help you win anytime soon. Doesn't really do anything. And yeah, okay, cool. I have two first-round picks in 2027, 2029. And I have Kevin Durant, who's, how old is Kevin Durant? 34? Like, that's not. Yeah, so like if you trade those picks, sure, cool. But like, even so, what are you going to get? Because as we see right now, I mean, yeah, players are always available at some point, but like, the Knicks have a lot of first round picks. Thunder have a lot of first round picks. Are they, really able to get somebody like that? I mean, are they able to trade for stars? So like, that's what makes it a little bit tough. Um, I just don't really see that happening. I do believe that if Kyrie somehow ended up in the Lakers, that's probably the easiest place for him to re-sign because like where else is he gonna go? Like we talked about his market. Like who else actually wants Kyrie Irving on their team? other than, right now the Nets and then the Lakers. I mean, people want him like Dallas and all that, but you know, you're not gonna give too much there. So that's why I'm not too crazy about it. I really just think the only option for the Nets is just keep him, call his bluff, and then just try to win a championship this year. If he says he wants to fulfill his obligation, you hope Kevin Durant stays healthy for for the rest of the year, and try to win your championship and see where you go from there. I think that's really the only thing you can do right now.
I agree.
I think we covered this enough. We're gonna see what happens. We're gonna see what happens. We have a week. This was kind of fun about this. It feels hard. This is a big trade to happen in a week, but um,
You know
yeah,
what? One last thing
yeah.
that I'll add to this is I think that microscope is on Sean Marks
Mhm.
when you have 3 star players decide they want to leave where they're at while they're under your team. And this is the same guy walking into 2021 that said that we're ready to give an extension to the 3 stars that all asked for trades. Only one of those guys signed it.
Yeah.
Only one of those guys signed it. And
He
then
immediately
lastly,
regretted it.
exactly. And and lastly, I was gonna say is you think of the aspect of how walking into this or looking at this scenario of what it is the Nets truly have always been on the organization side have been the reason why
um, Jeff, I lost you for a second. Have the Nets, the organization, have been the only reason why?
um that star players oh wait are have been the only reason why it's gotten to this point, right?
Yep.
Star players are going to be star players, right? There's going to be divas, there's going to be situations, right? There's never been a situation where every one of your players had to be questioned and be bluffed on, or you try to play the high road, like on these guys, right? Like you try to prove something to them, like you're not as valuable as you think you are, or something like that. That's just not a good sign. It's more damning for the future than it is for the present to me, because what players are going to want to come there when you hear these things being said? I saw something yesterday that I was saying that a bunch of players have spoken, and it shows a timeline now. Players that are not star players, role players that feel the same way about the Nets management at this point. The team that we knew in 2018, 2019, the front office that everyone was welcoming and saying that it had us a great culture is not there anymore. And a part of that is not just the players, a part of that is the front office has changed their calculus around how they treat players. And players feel that. See Bruce Brown talk about it. You see Blake Griffin talk about it. You've seen a number of players that have been with the Nets over these years that feel this way. This is not a there's not a rhetoric that's being passed across every team in the NBA. You have to start looking inwards before you start blaming all the players. You know, that's my last piece on that.
Very well said. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Like we said, we have a week to actually the deadline. Does Kyrie? Actually, I guess we can end it off this. Do you right now, if you had to make a bet, does Kyrie get traded by the trade deadline?
I think I said in the chat yesterday that we were in. I think it's a 45% chance. Um, I think I'll bump it up to like 55 today, waking up and thinking about it. Um, if it happens, think they welcome trades from Lakers because of draft capital. I think they welcome the trade of from the Suns if it's like recuperating some type of talent and also getting enough pieces to have a viable team. And I think those are the two in my mind most well, one other team in my mind that's realistic is the Raptors, but that's with a lot of caveats thrown in there that cause that to make it happen. But like I think those are the only three teams that realistically it can happen with if that 55% chance is actually actualized.
Interesting, interesting. I think I'm closer to 30%. It just it really doesn't feel realistic to me in the sense of just what you're gonna get back and you're still trying to compete. But we shall see. We shall see. Do you want to move on to our next topics about, like we talked about before, the all stars that were named and who were not named?
Yeah, if you would like, I could take the rings on this one,
Yeah, go for it.
and I'll name them all. So from the West Pool, obviously LeBron James being the captain again. This is his 19th season being an All-Star. I think that's 19 straight.
Yeah.
um, you then have he was the lead vote getter in the West, and I think the all of NBA. Then you have Steph Curry with 9 All Stars for guards, leading vote getter. Then you have Nikola Jokovic in his fifth All Star game, Luka Doncic in his fourth, and then to round it up, Zion Williamson in his second. And then for the East pool of players, you have Giannis once again being a captain as well. This is his seventh time being an All Star. Um, he was the lead vote getter in the East. For the forwards. The lead vote getter for guards in the East is 8-time All Star Kyrie Irving, and then you have Kevin Durant in his 13th All Star appearance, Jason Tatum in his fourth All Star appearance, and then rounding it up, Donovan Mitchell in his fourth all-star appearance. Brian, is there any like as we go through snubs, I think we should go through the starter snubs first.
Yep.
Is there any starter snubs that you felt um missed that the NBA missed out on for these starters?
Like, not really. I guess the only one is just like if you really think about how like the Eastern Conference starters doesn't have um doesn't have Joe Embiid. Joe Embiid's not a starter. So like they don't really have a true center in there. I guess Giannis is would be your center. That's the only tough part there. But like who do you drop? Like, that's the only tough thing. Maybe I drop Donovan Mitchell. I rather maybe I feel like I'd rather have all those other guys. Um and then throw Embiid in there. But other than that, I think they actually did a pretty decent job. Actually, the only other one, like Zion when healthy, I actually think deserves to be there. He just missed so much of this season that it makes it tough to put him in there. But I guess I'm not too mad at it. But what do you think?
I'm not mad at Zion at all.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think yes, he has missed games, but I think polarizing type of player. He deserves to be there.
Yep.
Who else? Who else at the guard at the forward level on the West is going to make it there? Like I'm looking through the list of everyone that made it. Sabonis,
Yep.
Laurie
Yep.
Markkinen. Like are these going to be the guys that you would have made a starter just out of the list that made the playoffs? I know there's obviously the conversation around Anthony Davis. Um, I think when we get deeper down, we could talk a little bit more about that. But that would be the only other person. And then the thing about the Donovan Mitchell's a guard. There was going to be two
Yeah.
guards selected, so like I don't have a problem with that. It proves more and more about just like how fluid the talent pool in the NBA is right
Mhm.
now. is that there's this much players that are playing at this level. But I will say this too. If you look at this list, I think to the exception of 2, maybe 3 players, every one of these players are injury prone. It's I don't think we've ever lived in an era of basketball where we've seen this much injury prone superstars. Like literally the only 3 players off the top of my mind in this list I could say are not truly injury prone is Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic, and Jokic. That's it. Everybody else misses time. Even Giannis, I think
I was gonna say that's the
there's
only other
to
one
say,
that I would think of.
but
Giannis is he doesn't get injured too much. He gets maybe banged up and like misses a game or two, but like for long standing injuries, I feel like you don't see Giannis too much.
exactly. And you want to know what's funny about that is like thinking about that calculus is 3 out of those 4 players are all European or international players of some sorts. So, like, I don't know if that's an indictment towards how the game in America is being played now, or how players have a laissez-faire approach to playing games is weighing into this, but it's a stat, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
fact that they're not from here, and these are the guys that you see play most of their games. Like it's glaring, honestly. So I agree with you. Joel Embiid would be the only person that I would want to have made the starter, but like realistically, it's
Yeah.
hard to put him in there when you have a guy like Tatum who would have been his position playing at an MVP level, has the um, best team in the league right now.
Yeah.
It's hard to not make him a starter. And
Yes,
it was
I
almost
see
hard not
why.
to even get Jalen Brown in there too.
I was gonna say it's kind of fun to see like the Nets as the only team with two players as starters. Uh but like the only other one you
not,
could think of is
not for long.
yeah. Well, we'll see. But yeah, Jalen Brown's the only other guy in there, but like I don't know. I wouldn't replace Jalen Brown with any of those other guys. So yeah, I think they did a pretty good job with the starters right now.
Perfect. So now, as we move from the starters, we move on to the reserve spots. This one is going to be a little bit more mixed bag. Couldn't really find like a complete split of the East and West reserves. Um, so to start off that list, you have Bam Adebayo. Um, I do not have how many times he's been an All Star. I couldn't find that for this list.
I
Um,
think two time.
but Time? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So yeah, Bam Adebayo coming back to the All Star game. Jalen Brown once again making the All Star game as well. You have DeMar DeRozan on a very underperforming team, making another All Star appearance. Joel Embiid, the biggest name there, right?
Yeah.
Making the All Star game again. Uh, Paul George once again making the All Star game. Shea Gilgis Alexander making his first appearance in this All Star game for the Thunder. Love to see that. Tyrese Halliburton, wannabe All Star, has
Yeah.
made the All Star.
Wally Zerbiak looking silly right now.
Definitely surprised that this guy made it. But Drew Holiday
Yeah.
is on this All Star team. Jaron Jackson Jr. has made the All Star game. Um, Dame Lillard once again an All Star. Laurie Markkinen making, I believe it's his first. I
Yeah.
I know it's his
Yeah, it's his
first.
first.
Love to see that too as well. John Morant, obviously, is an All Star. Demonis Sabonis once again an All Star. That's great to see as well.
Yeah.
And then to round it up, Julius Randle is back as being an all-star. Brian, what do you think about this list? And what are some snubs you feeling?
Oh man.
Just didn't get it.
It's pretty crazy just how many. I'm like, I look through all the good players in the league that like could have been in the All-Star game, especially on this reserves list, and like the list is pretty insane. I think the only surprising ones are the main. Are there's really two surprising ones in my mind: Drew Holiday and DeMar DeRozan. I think, well, one, Drew Holiday, it's pretty funny that if you're watching the TNT broadcast when they're announcing all these All Stars, they didn't have any film for Drew Holiday because they also were not expecting to show Drew Holiday whatsoever. That like that shows you that if the broadcast who's showing these people doesn't even have Drew Holiday even prepared or ready to show, that's kind of crazy. I think there's a couple players that like you don't want to say like, hey, Drew Holiday shouldn't be in the All-Star game. It's just that, and it's kind of even hard to say like there's other players that are more deserving. But kind of to me, it kind of feels like there are other players that are more deserving. Especially, I think the biggest one that you can see or you can say is James Harden. I think it's kind of crazy that James Harden is not an All-Star this year. This man's numbers are insane right now, and like he's playing. If it was last year's James Harden, especially when he was on the Nets, or even when he first went to the 76ers, that James Harden wasn't that great, but he's really turned it around this year. He's gotten in much better shape. Um, I can pull up his numbers in a bit, but yeah, I think that's kind of crazy. Of that, Drew Holiday made it more. He's 23 points, 11 assists, 6 rebounds. Like he's doing James Harden things right now. Very good. Another guy I would have liked to see make the team, someone like my boy Jalen Brunson. I understand why he didn't make it. He's I think right now, like, because where the Knicks sit, I believe they're the seventh seed right now. It's hard when you're in the seventh seed to have two All Stars or anything like that. But I truly do believe that even though Brunson's numbers aren't generally crazy, especially for NBA times, and there's a lot of other players that just have better numbers than Jalen Brunson. I don't know if they are as impactful to their team as Jalen Brunson. I really think if the Knicks did not have Jalen Brunson this year, they would probably be like the 11th seed, the 12th seed. Like they would they would be like easily 10 games under 500. And he's the only reason why that this whole season has turned around, in my opinion, especially affecting Julius Randle. I think there's maybe some little recency bias in the sense of Jalen Brunson. The last few weeks he wasn't as great, and Julius Randle was pretty fantastic the last few weeks. I think that's probably the biggest thing. Before I go any further, though, Jeff, what are your thoughts? Who do you have as well?
Have you ever seen like the wired tired like expression on Twitter where like someone gives you like the high level view of like what something is, and then there's the real granular view of
Yeah,
what it
yeah,
really is. For me, I feel like that's what the James Harden snub is James Harden is the wired situation. Like he's obviously playing amazing.
yeah,
He
yeah.
deserves to be on All-Star team. He's on the second best team in the East, right? Our third, it just keeps on moving, right?
It's too
Um,
close.
but the tired one would be, in my mind, would be Pascal Siakam,
Yeah,
right? Pascal Siakam is playing at a crazy level
yeah,
this year.
he
He's
is.
a team leader on every stat that matters right now for the Raptors. He's the only thing that's really keeping them afloat. He is truly someone that I look at and I say, like, damn, like, is anyone going to get in conversations with Raptors to see if they could take them off of their hands, right? He's been playing amazing. And this isn't the first time he's made the playoffs before, too. So, like, um, he's definitely someone I consider should have made it. Um, I was just mentioning the injury thing about how it's affecting how guys are being like it's affecting everyone in the league, right? It clearly affected two guys that missed the playoffs. One being Anthony Davis, who was playing at MVP level before he got injured, um,
Yeah.
and he's really stayed on the court for most of the season. That's not just a random thing. It's been
Yeah,
happening for a few years, but he's always still seamlessly made his way to the All-Star game, even when he had those
it's
issues.
true.
And then Devin Booker, this is the first time we've ever really seen Devin Booker had like an extended like sit out for injury. So like that's someone that who was also at the start of this year. Like it's so easy to forget because it's so funny because kind of the Suns are in that same situation the Nets had last year where they started off looking really good. Some people had doubts. Then they lose their star player and it just does not look right. And Evan Booker missed the playoffs, and those are two big names that I keep on considering. My thing is, you brought up Jalen Brunson. I think that there's merit to that.
Yeah.
I think there should have. That's another wired but tired situation. The wired
Mhm.
situation, the tired situation. I mean, is I think I mixed those two up actually, but the tired situation is that Knicks are back in playoffs contention, so Julius Randle deserves to be the All Star. The the wired situation really is that Knicks are back in playoffs contention because they got a guy like Jalen Brunson that changed how the outlook of this team looks, right? What he's done throughout this first half of the season definitely needs to be remarked on. Definitely has to be thought of as some of the reasons why they're in the place that they're at right now, which walking into the season or even ending last season, I'm not sure Knicks fans
Yeah.
felt that this is what we would be seeing from the Knicks in this year. So,
Not at all.
and then I think just where they are in the standings right now, there's merit to be said too about Aaron Fox missing the All Star game. The guy's playing his best basketball. He's on a winning team finally. Him not getting that recognition kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy of just how many good guards there are in just the West, even in the East. Like there's just the competition is so fierce. Like it's kind of crazy. Like I'm thinking about if you look at the Western Conference, like even just the guards that made it. John Morant, it should be in there. Damian Lillard should be in there, and SGA has been having a fantastic year. Should be in there. De'Aaron Fox, I think he deserves a spot. He's playing fantastic this year, but like over John Morant, I don't think so. Over Damian Lillard, actually, probably. I probably would do that just because of like Portland's 26-26 and the Kings are 29-22. And I don't know. Like if there's like I was talking about before, Knicks are the 7th seed. I don't know if they necessarily should have two All-Stars on there. Well, the Kings are the 3rd seed. I'm cool with that with them having two All-Stars on there. It's kind of I think it is kind of a little blasphemous that De'Aaron Fox is not an All-Star. Like what more does he really have to do? I think it's really just because he plays. If De'Aaron Fox was a LA Laker and he's doing what he's doing, automatic All-Star. It's that he's on the
Yeah.
Kings that no one even talks about him. So that's what
Yeah.
makes it tough.
It's funny too, like looking at like the last of like the fan return votes and seeing like some people that clearly it's hilarious that they're on this list.
Austin
Like I
Reeves.
look at like yes, that was gonna be the one that I was gonna start off with. And then you look at like Derrick Rose, obviously, you know
This
why.
man doesn't even play.
Westbrook
Yeah,
Westbrook's literally in the top 10. He's sixth in voting. Like,
that's
that's
crazy.
hilarious, you know? So you're right. Like, you look at the top four out of the West, they got those guys. They got Curry, they got Doncic, they got Moran. They got Shea, right? Then you look at the East, that's where it's like, what? Like, that's where the calculus
Yeah.
goes, like, what? Is like the top four is Kyrie, it's Donovan Mitchell, it's Jalen Brown, and it's James Harden. They said, "Nope." Then they said, "Nope" to Trey Young too, and then
Yeah.
they said, "DeMar DeRozan." Yep. Like,
Yeah.
even Tyrese, you look at Tyrese, he's further down in that fans voting too. Granted, you know why he's at that point, but
Yeah.
I think there's merit to start looking into doing one extra vote or one extra spot for a rookie. I think that would be fun
That would be fun.
idea that the NBA could have because, like, I think that Paolo does deserve a chance to be on this team. He's been electric. He's been exciting. He's been a fun guy to watch this season. Like, I've never seen a number one pick heavily not talked about, but
Yeah.
when they're playing well, like he's playing well and like he's just not talked about. It's very interesting to me. And I think that like that definitely should be a part of like the all-star calculus because a lot of the time these number one picks are these guys that are playing really well as rookies are guys that are not seeing national TV coverage, that are not getting that um, what I call
Yeah.
casual NBA fans like exposure, and this is the best way to give them that. So, like, I think if you need me to fly up to New York, Adam Silver, got some fresh ideas for you about the All Star game. Just hit
Yeah.
me up. This is definitely one of them.
I would actually like to see that, even if it wasn't like a rookie, but like someone in their first, I don't know, three years in the NBA, like or maybe even like you were talking about of like you have the rookie sophomore game kind of thing. Why not do? Even though it's not the rookie sophomore, but you only it's like the international kind of whatever it is, but I would like to see like at least one spot there because yeah, Paulo's playing great. Is he playing better than a lot of some of these other guys are on the list? Not necessarily, but I think it would be a fun experience. It'd be fun to actually even see. It is a little shameful, like just no one's even talking about Paulo at all this year. It's just because in Orlando, and also I think just there's so many other things going on in the league. Like there's so much going on that it's hard to talk about. Just like, oh, you see, Orlando looks pretty fun. They have a lot of pretty cool, fun pieces. Are they good? Not really, but they're really actually really fun to watch. The most confusing one on this list is kind of just like DeMar DeRozan and how it's just like you're talking about Pascal. How does Pascal not have that spot over DeMar DeRozan? It's it, it's just tough to see. I don't know. There's a lot of guys. You mentioned Trey Young. We haven't even talked about Anthony Edwards at all. Like that's another guy
Yeah.
who's playing really well, especially with Cat being out and everything. Darius Garland, another guy who's like playing pretty awesome, and Cleveland's what the third or the fourth seed are they or whatever? They're pretty close, or are they the fifth or fourth? I don't know. Uh, they're the fifth, but they're not too far off. So it would be fun to watch. Yeah, I don't know. It's they need more. They need more spots. The it's kind of crazy just how how many good players there are in the league that I can list off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that probably could have been an all-star, and I'm sure there's even more. Even like you talk about Paulo 9, like there's that many players that could have been an all-star that just did not make it.
Yep.
Oh man,
Agree.
it's it's a crazy time in the NBA. I'm excited for trade deadline. Do you think is this going to be an underwhelming trade deadline, or is this going to be craziness just because of how close this race for seeding is right now?
Uh, I think I led the show with this. Is that I don't think that we're going to see the fireworks that people are expecting, and I don't think I think it's going to be a problem for the next couple of years. I think we're getting closer and closer to that post LeBron era, which is leading back to like that issue the NBA had. A lot of people like to talk about how talented players are nowadays, right? But I think that same issue that happened in the early 2000s before LeBron really cemented himself, that I felt there was a lot of parity, and there was just like not a lot of um, guys separating themselves from the pack.
Yeah.
I think that that used to be very clear in the 2010s, even going into early into this decade, and the end of the 2000s, and then in generations before that, where you knew like you were a star,
Yeah.
but this guy's a superstar. Like you know what I mean? Like I think we're getting to that point again, and because of that, I think that that's going to affect how teams consider their players or trade their players. I think there's going to be a lot of guys stuck in situations where they're at because of that too, because it's going to be harder to want to move someone when you feel like you're not getting the value you want out of it because everyone feels like they have a chance at it, right? And maybe Victor is the one that shakes that up for this
True.
next decade of basketball, where he starts to when he comes to the league. Who knows? We never know. Some of these guys, they could be the most talented people that you see, and then in a few years, irrelevant, but they're not playing at the level that we expected, right? So I think that that's where we're heading towards, kind of like a post MJ era where it was just so unclear who's really the top dog. Like, yes, Shaq was great. Yes, Kobe was great, but Shaq and Kobe um, were forming themselves into being superstars. They weren't 100% there when the post MJ era happened, and then it just clicked where they became superstars, and they separated themselves. I think that's what we're going to have to see start happening in these next couple of years. Who's going to be those guys? Who's going to be those guys that separate themselves? And lastly, another thing to add on to the thing that we talked about the most in that situation is one thing that I remembered is like you look at the last three opportunities to trade someone. I think it's time to put a little bit slack on the superstars on the Nets team because like I think that because of their the best way to put it is selfishness. They've cannibalized opportunities that Nets could get pieces that would help you ultimately becoming a contender. I say this more and more as the days pass. I've said this in on the pod earlier. I think that the worst thing the Nets did was never that they traded for James Harden. It's never that they did this situation with Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving. The worst thing they wind up doing is when they made a move for someone, didn't go for the guy that made sense on a team perspective. They went for the guy that had the most talent. And I hope other teams don't make that same mistake during this time. Drew Holiday, I think if the Nets got Drew Holiday, and this is a thing that doesn't ever get talked about anymore,
Mhm.
is if the Nets got Drew Holiday instead of making the whole play, because remember the Harden thing materialized really quickly in that offseason.
Yeah.
It went from they saw them practicing in Miami to now there's interest. Harden asses out before training camp, and then it materializes like that. But the whole conversation that offseason was make a play for Drew Holiday. And he would have been the perfect type of guard to have alongside Kyrie Irving. Um, Sad to see, and it shows that's a large reason why the Bucks won their championship. But I hope other teams remember that. They see that as like a cautionary tale. It doesn't necessarily the next move doesn't always has to be a star player. It sometimes needs to be valuable, very valuable role players.
Yeah, it really seems that some teams are learning this right now of think about even like the Celtics getting like Derek White last trade deadline, and like little things like that. Like who no one even thought about Derek White like that. And then he comes to the Celtics and he's a really great role player and he fits in really nicely, and little things like that. There definitely comes to a point where, like you're saying, more talent isn't necessarily the best idea, and that just, you know, bolster around the talent that you already have. I think teams are starting to learn that, but I don't know, maybe not the Lakers who just won stars on stars on stars. But I think the smarter organizations are learning. But I think that was very well said. It should be interesting. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I hope, so all the listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoy. I feel like this is a little bit different take than at least a lot of the other stuff that I've heard going on about this Kyrie Irving situation. You know, everyone's talking about, oh, he's gone with the trades and this and that. I feel like we have a pretty good take on it. So I'm interested to see what happens. This has been episode 48.
Peace.